According to International Society of Hypertension, hypertension is the leading cause of death worldwide, affecting more than 1.4 billion people and accounting for more than 28,000 deaths each day. According to the World Health Organization, globally, more than 1 billion people are known to have hypertension, and the figure is estimated to have increased to 1.5 billion by 2025. I welcome you to another edition of African Complementary and Alternative Therapy, Africam. I am Oluwaseun Oyebade. On today's edition of Africam, we will be talking about hypertension and what are some of the predisposing factors and the menace that it has caused in our society. I won't be doing the discussion alone. I have here with me Mrs. Christiana Olakpade Ojo, the Managing Director of NAL Specialist Clinic. She will be telling us about the herbal remedies and the herbal both curative and preventive measures that we can use in the treatment of hypertension. Mrs. Christiana Olakpade Ojo, you've been a major resource personnel for herbal research in Nigeria. And as regards this, we want to get more of the knowledge that you have as regards the treatment of hypertension. And we are glad to have you on Africam today because we know that viewers at home will enjoy a very lot much out of your profound knowledge. How are you doing, ma?
I'm very well, thank you. Thank you for having me on Africam once more. I'm honored to be here.
You've heard about the statistics that I read out as regards hypertension. And when we talk about all this, the menace that hypertension has caused in our society, we have in over 1.4 billion people that are suffering from hypertension in the whole world globally. In Nigeria, how are we going to say we have been coping with the menace of hypertension? Do we still have it so much with us among the global population, or it is much more lesser rates here in the country?
When we talk about statistics in the Nigerian parlance, we can never have, an accurate representation of what the numbers represent. So I would rather we depend on the global figures that are available to us. But in the reality, from what we gather at our center, I think that the statistics is probably more than what is being reported globally, because there are several people that even walk into the clinic. It is during routine preliminary check that they find out that their blood pressures are actually not normal, that it's on the high side. And then you find out that a lot of people find it difficult. You need to more or less coerce them, literally beg them to go into clinics for checkup. So that makes it difficult to be able to say out of 10 people, 6 people are potentially or actively hypertensive. But from the data that we see from time to time, I could confidently say that out of 10 people that walks into the clinic, 50% of them, 5 out of them, are probably hypertensive. So the thing is, you have a 50% chance of being hypertensive as a Nigerian, especially considering the Nigerian environment as well.
Looking at another basic statistics that was read out last year during the World Hypertension Week, it was stated that 1 out of 3 people are actually suffering from hypertension in Nigeria. And aside that, when we say 1 out of these 3 people, then if we are, say, a population of 200 million, then that's say over 70 million people are suffering from hypertension. But out of these 70 million people that are suffering from hypertension or battling with hypertension, only 23 million people actually know that they are hypertensive. And when we know, according to how we react to our nature, some we know and some we not even bother to even seek treatment. Now, for anyone that chose not to get needed treatment for hypertension, what are the dangers it would cause to society?
Wow. Before we even talk about the dangers it will cause to society, we need to acknowledge the dangers it causes to that person and their immediate family. That's why you find out that there are so many incidences of people slumming and dying with no initial clinical record of hypertension or anything. No clinical record because they have not even gone into the clinic. So you don't even know what is going on in their bodies. So you find out there was a time, I think last year, a lady was in a certain taxi, and by the time they got to the destination, she was dead, in the passenger seat. So hypertension is a silent killer. We cannot rule that out. But despite that, despite being a silent killer, it's got its signs that a lot of people ignore because they don't realize it is their bodies screaming out for help to them. So that being said, the moment an individual is not optimal in their how do I put it, in their output, there is no way to not affect the society. So it's directly linked to their productivity. If you are not okay as an individual, the society cannot benefit from you. So it affects the society in every way because when you are not aware of the things, when you are not educated about the things you are supposed to do, you can't even pass that education down to people around you. For instance, if you are a leader of an organization and you yourself, you are not aware of the importance of ordinary checkup or being aware of your health status, how do you then guide your staff to do the same thing? How then will they be productive or optimally productive in adding value to your organization and directly adding value to the society? They can't be.
Well, it has been accounted that in Africa, 80% of our medications, so people rely on herbs to treat themselves. But now, taking this from the clinical aspect, that people don't pay attention to their health, are we going to say that people are maximizing their access to herbal products to get themselves treated instead of the medical line?
The thing is, before you get to the point of maximizing information, are you informed in the first place? So the 80% that are going to that have access to alternative herbal remedies, do they even know what they are using it for? Okay. Do you understand? Okay. So it's a different thing to have access to all of the maybe anti-malaria mixtures or all the plants around you. It's a different thing to know that you have the malaria parasite in your bloodstream and at what stage it is. It's a different thing to understand that, okay, this thing is used for hypertension. It is different for you to have knowledge about what hypertension is, how it affects your lifestyle, how it affects the people around you, how the things you put in your mouth affects the presentation of hypertension or, stuff like that. So yes, 80% of African population makes use of herbs, but are they educated about what they are using it for? Are they using it for the right thing? Exactly.
Earlier you said that hypertension is a silent killer. For everyone that has been hearing about hypertension, high blood pressure, it is always a silent killer. Yes. But you made mention that it comes with some certain signs or symptoms that one could get to notice from the medical or from general observation. What could be some leading signs and symptoms?
Yeah, from data, what we have found out that a lot of people, the first thing a lot of people complain about is that they don't sleep well. So the moment your sleep is becoming shortened, your sleep hours is reducing, you need to start paying attention for whatever reason. Either because you just cannot sleep or your mind is too troubled. That's why they will tell you that stress leads to hypertension. It doesn't really lead to it, but it aggravates it. It makes it worse. Okay. So the moment you find out that you're not sleeping enough, it is time for you to go to the clinic. Even when you're trying to sleep, you can't sleep without aid. Some people, that's why they drink a lot. Some people, that's why they swallow pills and all of that just to sleep. The moment that has started with you, it is time to go to your clinic. The moment you're having constant headaches, especially when it is, on the frontal side or maybe in the center of the head, and it's constant, you're having headaches for no reason, or maybe, yes, even for a good reason, but the headaches wouldn't even go away, even when you swallow painkillers, and you're just feeling, I just have a slight headache. There are so many people that have complained about slight headache, and the next thing we knew was they just slumped there. So headache is one of the major signs that comes with high blood pressure. Not being able to sleep is another thing that comes with high blood pressure. And then another major sign that a lot of people ignore is dizziness. They call it dizzy spells. It comes with fever. A lot of times when people are feeling feverish, when they bend down and they try to get up, they experience a kind of dizzy spell like they are going to fall down. That happens with people with high blood pressure. A lot of people with high blood pressure have also reported that. So those are one of the signs. So the moment you have one or all of these three signs, not sleeping well, consistent headache, and then you're having dizzy spells. It's just, there's no harm in just going to a nearby pharmacy and saying you want to check your BP. It is very likely that if you're experiencing those three things, your BP is very likely elevated.
So what is the ideal blood pressure, human blood
Yes, the ideal blood pressure is between 120/80. The upper one that we call systolic should not be more than 130. 130 is a borderline measurement because it's a measure of like anxiety. So the moment it is above 125 and nearing 130, and you are not more than 50 years old, and your systolic is reading 130, you need to start taking things slow. It doesn't mean you're hypertensive yet. It just means you are at the gate of entering the hypertension compound, something like that. And then the lower one, the diastolic, should not be more than 80 or 85. The moment it gets to 90, it would mean that your heart is exerting too much pressure to pump blood through your blood to your capillaries. So you need to pay attention the moment you approach like you are on 85 and you are nearing 90, you need to take care. So readings from 125, 85, 130, 85, 130, 90, they are borderline readings and you need to take care. But the normal reading is 120, 80. If you still have like 115, 119, 78, 75 is fine. But I always tell people, if ordinarily, because there are some people whose blood pressure are just normally low, maybe due to certain reasons that we can't place our hands on, but very likely maybe a hole somewhere where it shouldn't be. Some vessels are more distended than they should be. Those are some congenital issues anyway. But if it does not threaten their life in any way and they've lived with that all their life. So I've seen people whose normal BP will be about 110, 70, and they'll be like, oh, they are fine. That is what is always read. But if your BP has always been 120/80 and it suddenly starts to drop to maybe 110/70 or it drops to 60, it means you're going into hypotension, which means your heart is beginning to have some issues with circulating blood. So you also need to speak with your physician.
Are you going to support this research that says that despite the fact that the awareness for hypertension is much more big, or let me say the information about hypertension is much more accessible in the urban centers, but yet people that are suffering from hypertension, they are also in this area compared to the people living
in the rural
area. Then there is this also a belief that women suffer from hypertension more than men. Are you going to support those school of thoughts?
Okay, so let me take the two one after the other about being in urban centers and having more information and still suffering from the condition more. Yeah, we know that in rural areas, people are exposed to less automated or less industrialized lifestyles.
Okay.
They don't use generators like we inhale CO2 here. There are no noises. You get to your house, you sleep with the sunset, you eat natural foods. So even if they have the hypertension in their genes, the environment that would unlock it is not there. But in the urban area, even if you do not have hypertension in the genes, it is very likely you become hypertensive because if you live in a place like Lagos, for instance, you don't get home till about 12 midnight. By 4 a.m., you are off. An average adult requires at least 7 hours of effective sleep, not just some closing your eyes or something. Effective sleep within 24 hours. An average adult needs 7 hours of that. Without that, your vital organs, your system, your physiology will become imbalanced. And that is what people live with for years. That's why we started seeing people in their late 20s, early 30s presenting high blood pressure, which is very odd. And that's why the life expectancy has been greatly reduced. You see people dying at 40, 42, 45, whereas in the rural areas, so-called rural areas, they are still living well up to their 80s and 90s. The environment is what makes the difference between the urban and the rural dwellers. So even if the urban people have all of the information, they have all of the technology, their environment is a minus for them. And when the rural people do not even know anything, because they live in an environment where they don't easily get predisposed to these conditions or its triggers. It just seems like they are doing fine. So the environment there is what makes the difference, as well as attitude. I've met a lot of very educated people, and then they will tell you, oh, I'm fine, there's nothing wrong with me.
Yeah.
Remember, I told you hypertension is a silent killer. And then when you query them along the line of understanding that there are some signs your body might be exhibiting, they'll be like, oh, they didn't make anything of it. Yeah, they had a headache about twice or thrice last week, but they used painkillers. And then by the time you nudge them or encourage them to go on and have their pressure checked, we will find out that, it's shooting above the roof. So the signs are always there. Now, about women being more predisposed to high blood pressure than men, I think that has to do with the way women are wired. Women are wired naturally to take on a lot of stress. They're emotional beings. So, while the man is, a lot of anxiety. So while the man is taking a lot of things off his mind, the woman is thinking about everything. They are multitasking. So the stress level of the woman is a lot higher than that of the man, biologically and emotionally. So yes, it is understandable that the woman will be much more predisposed to high blood pressure.
So let us move away from the medical angle of treating hypertension. Using your wealth, from a wealth of knowledge to address hypertension, what are some of those things that will be beneficial to humans when it comes to treatment of hypertension? Africam is a program that is meant to explore what God has given unto us. The herbs is for our treatment. Nature has promised us, we are blessed with all that. So how can we get to use what God has blessed us with without passing through any synthetic process or whatsoever before we can get ourselves treated?
Thank you. Yeah, so I always say this: before you would source for a solution for a problem, you need to have a deep understanding of the root cause of that problem. When we understand what causes high blood pressure, then we will know the kind of foods and why we are eating those foods, or why we are deleting those foods from our regular diet. So for instance, high blood pressure is known to be caused because blood vessels they are narrowing, and then the heart needs to exert more pressure to pass blood through those blood vessels, and that pressure that the heart is exerting is what we call high blood pressure. So basically it is as a result of blood vessels narrowing. So I usually do this experiment with the pen, our biros. If you take the narrow straw and the wide straw, if you blow through it, you find out that your cheek would go through more pressure, would be subjected to more pressure, blowing through the narrow one. That's exactly what happens. Now, what are those things that narrow the vessels? It is cholesterol deposits that have been oxidized over the years. This oxidation does not happen in 5-10 years. Sometimes it takes 30 years. Even under normal circumstances, if you were living in a fantastic environment without stress and you are eating the wrong foods, remember, our body is made up of I think about more than 25 to 35% of cholesterol. Our skin has cholesterol, our liver produces cholesterol, our brain, all those soft tissues are made of cholesterol. So our cholesterol consumption should be minimal. But a lot of people, from cradle to grave, they keep consuming high sources of dangerous cholesterol because we keep eating meat, we eat butter, we eat fatty stuff that had no value to that we can get alternatives for anyway. And then all of these things, we can't get away from it. What they do, by the time your liver processes what it needs, it supplies the body. Those excesses are what gets, deposited all over. They become a burden. So you have oxidized cholesterol in your capillaries, it narrows it. The first thing is, how do I prevent cholesterol from depositing? If it has deposited, how do I do a cleanup of my blood vessels? There is one plant that is very common. I hope it would not become, because there was a program I did and then Garcinia cola became became really expensive. But please don't make it expensive if you are a merchant of garden egg, our regular green garden egg. It comes either in light or dark green. Garden egg is a fantastic cholesterol cleaner. It's also of the family Solanaceae, and I think it's Solanum nigrum. I think that's the word. I hope that's not. There is the other garden egg, aubergine, is purple. That's not the garden egg I'm talking about. I'm
Okay.
talking of the one that I think the Easterners use it to eat peanut or something.
Peanuts.
Very
We
fantastic.
see it regularly. You see people or
And it's
kids.
seasonal. So you can heat your garden egg like just take the size of your fist, two of it in the morning, two of it at night. That's the traditional dosage. And that's how I prescribe it to people. Just eat a lot of garden egg, and that's the cholesterol cleaner. So each time you are eating garden egg, you understand what it is going to do in your body. So for everything you are putting in your mouth, you know what it's going to do in your body. Now, one food that you need to get rid of is seasoning cube or anything that has high sodium in it, which
Okay.
also includes seafoods. When I tell people seafoods, they are wondering, oh, why? The reason is because under the shells of things like crayfish,
Crab.
lobsters, prawns, crabs, you have a high deposit of sodium in there.
Okay.
And sodium is what elevates blood pressure. That's why when you take a lot of sodium into the body, you might start experiencing palpitation because the heart would need to do more work to get the blood through the vessels. So sodium does some kind of constriction to the blood vessel, whereas potassium, which is highly readily available in our pineapples, ripe pineapples now,
Okay.
in our pineapples, does the opposite of what sodium does to the blood vessels. So while sodium is narrowing blood vessels, potassium is relaxing
Expand.
it.
Okay.
Potassium is where the idea of slow K. In hospitals, they would say they are injecting slow K in order to, crash the blood pressure and all of that. But with a good diet of
Garden egg.
pineapple and garden egg, you are sure to be able to bring your blood pressure to minimal, to normal range. Not within, because I always get this problem. When I mention these things, people will use it within a week or two. And they will start calling me, Ma, you said we should be eating this. I can't see any difference. No, you will not see any difference immediately.
Okay.
The thing is, the cholesterol deposits that I
Didn't get
mentioned,
in
they
a day.
didn't get there in a day, not even a year, not even in 5. So it has to be a diet,
It has to
a
be a
lifestyle
lifestyle.
for you, a dietary lifestyle. Getting rid of some of these things and including some of these things. I tell people I have not used seasoning cube for more than 5 years now, since 2015 May, and I always celebrate it every May. Like, oh, the last time I used seasoning cube. It's because it's a deliberate step for me towards wellness. It's not like I don't like seasoning cube. I love the taste as well. But of course, I have gotten other alternatives that work for me
Okay.
because I realized that, for instance, powdered fish, now there are a lot of it being commercialized. Powdered fish, some powdered dry meat and all of that. Those are things, our ordinary stock. When I do lectures or health talks, I ask a cross section of elderly audience, and I ask them, when was the first time you saw seasoning cubes? And from their responses, we did not have seasoning cubes in the 1930s. You can confirm that anywhere. If we didn't have seasoning cubes at that time, how did our forefathers cook? How did our grandmothers cook? And yet, our grandfathers enjoyed their foods. They had things like ogiri. They had things like iru. I have not yet mentioned iru. Iru is a fantastic antihypertensive. For a lot of my patients, I just tell them, be eating garden egg, pineapple, and include unsalted iru. Remember, salt would elevate the blood pressure.
Yes.
So we tell them, rinse off the salt before you use the iru.
Zero.
Some of them, I'll tell them to be eating it like granules. And they come back and they give me very good responses.
So
So
we
a
are
lot
going to
of
say the improved technological advancements of how we can make things better or process things
it has got
the
its downsides on our
on
lives.
our
Yeah,
lifestyles. So
absolutely.
we getting things better, then we need to start going natural again and leaving the
It doesn't mean we
process.
become archaic or less modern. Technology is beautiful, but those things, those parts of technology, that's what evolution is about. Those parts of technology that will be detrimental to our lives, we need to minimize it. And those parts of, our traditional practices that are good for our lives, we need to keep carrying them along and drop the ones that maybe not add value to us.
So we want to use this moment to appreciate you on African complementary and alternative therapy. We believe that with the advancement of herbal researches, with the advancement of herbal medicine in our society, then Africa can become great again. And that is
Amen.
the focus
Yeah.
of this program. Thank you for coming on the program and for telling us so much on how to live a healthy lifestyle.
Thank you for having me.
And that is a wrap on today's edition of African Complementary and Alternative Therapy. Tune in same time, same station. Next week, we'll be coming your way with another exciting topic and another guest. Do have a wonderful day. I am Oluwaseun Oyebade.